Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. If this is your first time joining us, wait, can you see? Oh, you can't see it. My name is Angie Sanchez. I'm a PhD student in the Department of Geography, Environment, and Spatial Sciences at Michigan State University. My research focuses on increasing access to breastfeeding support resources in Indigenous communities. So we are doing a series of webinars with two Indigenous IBCLCs who I have recruited to assist me in my mission of increasing access. It's their mission too.
And taking over the world.
Yes. We're taking over the world. One Indigenous lactation consultant at a time. Watch out. Anywho,
Session 8. What can we do?
Yeah. This is our second to last session. We're tired. We're goofy.
It's gonna get fun.
So we have lots of we've done a bunch of webinars this past couple days. We got one more after this. This session is titled Time to Get Real. How are we as how are we as healthcare practitioners harming Indigenous people? Because I thought it was a pretty good topic because I feel like it happens a lot, and maybe sometimes it's intentional. A majority of the time, it's probably not. We like to be optimistic and hope that it's not, but it happens, and we need to figure out ways to make it not happen or reduce it. Harm reduction. That's what we're about. Harm reduction. So that is why I decided to make that the topic for this chat. So we're just going to kind of do a free for all and talk about things that come up in the work that we do, and things that we see, and offer some suggestions of what you all can do if you are a healthcare provider, a non-Indigenous one that's listening to our talk, whether it's live or the recorded version. Hopefully give you some tips to help with that harm reduction. So with that being said, I'm going to pass the mics over to my two awesome friends, Kim and Cami, who are two Indigenous IBCLCs and just have like this unbelievable wealth of knowledge. I love being in space with them because I learn every single time. So anyway, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and then we're just going to move on with the conversation. So thanks for joining us.
Yate, good afternoon. My name is Kimberly Morsalis. I'm Dene from Navajo Nation, born in Tuba City. Been in Arizona most of my adult life. However, I moved to Northern California among the Hupa, Yurok, and Karuk people. Um, I'm a lactation consultant, been an IBCLC for um, over 10 years, been in the work for over 12 years. I currently do some work in my community now, doing some home visits, community work. Recently got contracted with the United Indian Health Services for the WIC program in McKinleyville, California, and also working very part-time at a hospital um, in Arcata, which is called Mad River Hospital, which most of the Indigenous members there deliver their babies. So I hope I can make a difference there. I did hospital lactation in Phoenix, Arizona for a long time. And now, other than the work that I'm doing in California, me and Cam are just traveling the country and providing training, making new friends. And we were invited to do this webinar series with Angie, and we're so thankful. And we are so happy to be here. So thank you for having us.
Yeah. All right. Lisampa Washtemi Takiapi. Good afternoon, my relatives. My name's Cami Goldhammer. I'm Sisseton Wahpeton from South Dakota. Live in Duwamish Territory, also known as Seattle. I'm a lactation consultant, IBCLC, full spectrum Indigenous doula, and licensed clinical social worker. And I am one of the co-instructors for the Indigenous Lactation Counselor training that I do with Kim. And at home, I'm also the executive director of Hummingbird Indigenous Family Services. And we have a Hummingbird Indigenous Doula program and Hummingbird Nest, which is a guaranteed basic income program that we'll be launching in early 2023. So yeah, really happy to be here. Thank you so much for everyone that's been with us over the last few days. And welcome to the new folks. So grateful for your time. Everyone's gonna be sick of us pretty soon.
Never.
Never.
Um,
And I was like, I just want
so
to say hi to Christy. I was like, I don't think we've met Christy from
no,
Hawaii.
she's calling from Hawaii.
Yeah.
Hawaii.
Super early. over
So
there.
early in Hawaii, yeah. Oh, well,
Thank
we
you for-
love Hawaii. Kim and I got to teach our Indigenous Lactation Counselor training there in October of 2019, and it was so special, like just such a
Yeah.
special training.
It was just like it felt like a ceremonial retreat. It was
It was-
awesome.
It
was really
and
awesome.
It was so good.
I'm still salty.
Come back,
that
please.
I didn't get to go with you.
I know.
Next
Well,
time.
I was I kept saying, like, on the slide, you guys need an assistant?
I know. Chrissy says, come back. So this is what we told the Hawaii crew is we said, bring us back for one more. And then you got to create your own training. So you need a whole Native Hawaiian training, but we would love to come back. We just had like the best time. Trained 40 Indigenous lactation counselors there. All of whom were Native Hawaiian, or I think we had one person that was a couple of folks that were Samoan, and then one that was Native American who lived in Hawaii. So it just was from all of the islands. We had representation from all of the islands. We were
So
hosted
awesome.
on Homestead Land in Waimanalo. It was just such a special trip, and we would love to come back. So yeah, one of the things that we do, Christy, with our Indigenous lactation counselor training is we only go to communities that we're invited to. So you make it happen.
That's
be
your
there.
cue.
Yep,
You
you'll
gotta-
be there.
You got to ask them to come back. Make sure that you request that they bring an assistant.
Name Angie Sanchez.
Yeah, and a cameraman.
And a cameraman.
Actually, for real, that would be awesome. Like if the Indigenous people in Hawaii need to make a documentary, get some film footage, and create a story.
Yeah.
We
Well,
got
because the
people for ya.
breastfeeding, the Indigenous Native Hawaiian, I'm trying to think of the coalition name, Amber's coalition name, Indigenous Breastfeeding Coalition of Hawaii or something.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I think
it's a
name.
Hawaiian and it's a Hawaiian name.
Yeah.
But anyhow, Amber Granite is like one of our favorite people and breastfeeding champions there. And so we just like love her. Definitely would love to come back. And it's been a hot minute. It's been 3 years.
Yeah.
It's been a cold
fun.
minute.
Yeah.
Hot minute. Yeah. Anyway, we're ready to come back. So welcome. Happy to have you here, Christy. And if anyone else on here wants to introduce themselves, please do so. But yeah.
All right.
Cool.
So we don't really have any I mean, if people have questions, feel free to ask questions. But basically just free for all. Like what are some of the things that you see from
All the
healthcare?
things
that are harmful to
all the
families.
things that we see that we have difficulty talking about. I will say, like, kind of before we jump into it, like, this is a really important topic, and it's something that that we don't often get to talk about
freely
for a lot of reasons, right? Like, one of them is just like the hierarchy within a healthcare system really prevents lactation consultants, families, there's a hierarchy there, and we say that, like, we center the families, or that's who we're serving, but that's not how it rolls out, in actuality. And so there's a big power dynamic within the healthcare field. And I will say, like, as a community-based lactation consultant, that really what led to my burnout as a private practice lactation consultant was it was like the same story
Mm-hmm.
every single time. I didn't even need to see a parent. I knew that things went wrong in the hospital, that they were underserved in the hospital, that the hospital is where their breastfeeding story, like was undermined. And it just got so hard to hear it over and over and over
Mm-hmm.
again and have to repair the damage that had been done, like so many times. And
Mm-hmm.
it got so frustrating and yeah, it was hard.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard, but there's not much that we can there's not much that we can do because we don't have a lot of power in there. And so, I know we have, at least the folks that have introduced themselves here are community members. And so I would also say for those of you that are here, if there are things that baby is typing, that's funny. If there are things that you have seen in healthcare providers, or things that people have said to you as a parent, as a doula, as someone providing lactation support to community, you can let us know, and we can always kind of expand on that too.
Mm-hmm.
um but it's really challenging, and this is where I think healthcare providers really need to reflect on kind of what and be open. I mean, we're a pretty straightforward group. like um I can be really, really gentle and understanding and kind and compassionate with parents and things like that. But we only have like an hour, hour and a half to cover this topic. And so, yeah, and we'll just say what we need to say.
Mm-hmm.
But I hope that you can be open to hearing it, and know that we not only are we native lactation supporters, but we are all native moms, and we are the community that we serve, and representative of that. And I think that that's important. And we also um, have privileges that some of our community members don't have too,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so there's certain things that we got or maybe didn't get because of those privileges, whatever that is, whether that's a husband or a college degree or a job to pay for, certain things. There's just
Mm-hmm.
a lot of different things that when a family comes in to see you like that bias can come out. And so anyway, just something to think
Yeah.
about there, as far as
Yeah.
healthcare providers
I
go.
think too, I think since we've been talking about this since Wednesday, we covered a lot of information about um, things said to families that are harmful. Like, again, we talk about breastfeeding and how that can really play a factor on how mom feels about her body with breastfeeding. Again, if her birth doesn't go well, it could be her, just words of saying something that is not, again, I've dealt with families where they're in their mind, their breasts are perfect. And then you have one provider saying, mom has flat nipples, she can't breastfeed, and saying that right in front of her on the phone, calling me in, that can really play a huge factor on mom's ability to breastfeed, to motivate to breastfeed, and her doubting her body already. So I really, for me, working in the hospital for a long time, I really think about language and body language, comments, facial expressions, and it really comes a long way. And it's really frustrating to have them check their privilege, have them check their education, their role in the hospital. Um, and a lot of the nurses I work with are old school too. They come from a heavily formula feeding decade of
Yeah.
this is their education. They don't want to change their ways. Um, how does the provider back you up if you want a family to breastfeed and there's things that may go wrong? So those are things I had a lot of challenges, and then mostly just saying the wrong things, assuming that a Black mom or a Native mom's not gonna breastfeed because, oh, they don't do it anyways.
Right, because
Yeah,
statistically we have low rates.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
and that can
yeah,
be hard. And talk about undoing the damage being done. Um, because I've been on the other end too, like you've seen like hospital lactation kits on that's causing even sometimes harm, right?
mhm,
And then going to you and you're seeing like, "Oh, this is, I gotta fix this,
mhm,
right?" Um, I've been on the other end where I was at a clinic, worked at a clinic for 2 years, and seeing what you saw.
yeah,
And it's so frustrating when you have providers and health care professionals just mess up a feeding or mess up an assessment and not doing the things they're supposed to do to assist a family. And it's really, really frustrating. And I think for me, that burned me out.
yeah,
It burned me out where I just didn't want to do any work for a while, because you're undoing so much. And I was seeing 15 people a day, if not more.
yeah,
And yeah, it's a lot of work, a lot of, I just wish, I think all the training can be done for all healthcare professionals when it comes to like, make how is milk made? How does those first 2 days of having the mom there important with breastfeeding? How are we encouraging them to continue breastfeeding? And then like bedside manners. I think they forget a lot about bedside manners, and it's really, really frustrating. But yeah, I mean, doing that for 8 to 5 or 9 to 6 every day, 5 days a week was really hard.
yeah.
And but yeah, it was challenging. And now I'm going to do it very part-time, one shift every 6 weeks. I think that could be be
A
perfect for me.
happy median.
Yes.
Yeah. I think kind of when you were saying about you know providers, and I'll just kind of use providers as like, I know typically in a hospital we referred a provider as like a doctor or a nurse practitioner,
Hmm.
but kind
Hmm.
of lactate, I'll say kind of more like those that are providing medical support,
Hmm.
particularly in the hospital setting. And kind of when it comes to Black and Native parents,
Hmm.
just kind of being like, they're not even gonna breastfeed, so not even bother.
Hmm.
And that like actually happens,
Yep.
and it's not intentional. Like there's, that I had one LC, and I had never heard of it before, but I had one LC actually tell me like, to be completely honest, like when I see a Black mom or a mom of color, like I know that it's going to be unlikely that they're going to keep breastfeeding, and so I don't work as hard with them. I don't spend as much time with them, and I was so grateful for her
Yep.
honesty, in that. And we were having like a real talk conversation around this. And I told her how happy, like how grateful I was that she told me that, because I know that's true. And we actually have research now that backs, that up. And I think I mentioned that the other day that, moms or parents of color, birthing people of color, lactation consultants spend anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes less with them than white moms, in a visit. And it's like, that is really important information to know, and this is where, for healthcare providers, when we really start talking about the harm that's done to, in this case, Native families, that's who we're talking about. Like, it is your bias, it is your racism, like it is,
Yes.
whether it's implicit or explicit. And we recognize it, like in general, like you're not even aware of it because we're all swimming in this like water, right?
Hmm.
Like kind of thing. And so, I know you're not intentionally being like, I'm going to provide worse care to this
Hmm.
Native mom, but because your bias isn't in check and you are, oftentimes in denial of it, it just continues to perpetuate, and it leads to poor healthcare outcomes, maternal and infant death. I mean, this is like
Hmm.
really, really, really serious. Um, and so, it's one of those things that and I know that people are burnt out on like diversity, equity, what is it? What,
Inclusion, DEI.
inclusion, DEI. It's like when, Yeah, like, I know people are burnt out on it and they're like, "Oh, why are we talking about it?" And it's like, because it's a
because
huge a
it's a
problem.
problem.
It's a huge problem.
Yeah, it is a huge
It's
problem.
a
Yeah.
huge problem. And you know, providers, like I know I keep having to go back to like why someone wants to become a doctor, or why someone chooses nursing or whatever that profession, their profession. And
Mhm.
I have to believe it was like for altruistic reasons, and that they wanted to serve and they wanted to care. And I ig- recognize how the system like eats that out of you, and like, when you're part of that system, it's just like really hard to stay in that space. um and I understand like the hazing that occurs, and the
Mhm.
schedule, just like all the things that
Mhm.
work to like break you down from that like altruistic, I'm going to serve and heal and be this thing, to like a racist doctor, right? Like
Mhm.
kind of thing. And that like that is your own, and someone's own process that they go through that they maybe didn't have any control over. But it's just really important to address. um so I think like when it comes to Native families, like you have to, a provider's own personal bias is what causes significant harm
Mhm.
in general.
Yeah.
I feel like you guys had mentioned this um, earlier in one of the other webinars about how folks, pregnant people, are not even asked during their
Mhm.
pregnancy, like how do you plan to feed your
Mhm.
baby? Like
Yeah.
that seems like such a simple thing that healthcare providers can do during
Mhm.
pregnancy. It's a just simple
Yeah.
question. How do you plan to
Yeah.
feed your baby? Because then that's, that can help set things up. If they
Yeah.
say, I'm gonna formula feed, then,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, you're
that's
trying to make it up at the first feed. You know what I mean?
yeah,
And you're trying to, cram in a lot of information the first hour,
yeah.
and when they know nothing about
When you know
breastfeeding.
nothing.
And
A-
that's the problem we
And
had.
everything else that's
Yep.
going on.
Yeah.
And your hormones are all
Right.
jacked.
You
And
just like
you're
went to the Star World to
Yeah.
yep,
retrieve your baby. You almost like,
yep,
Yeah.
right? Like you straddled death and life. And then like 20 minutes
Yeah.
later, you're like supposed to be there and aware and know how to feed your baby.
Yeah.
mm-hmm,
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
yep,
I mean, we see it that way, but
Yeah.
providers see it just black and white, right?
yeah.
Like, and for me, I was a co-chair for the lactation committee at the hospital, and that was one of our goals. And we worked on the goal to have little messaging when the parent would come in for their prenatal. And you would not believe the pushback we got, because they didn't want to do another extra drop down menu to say they talked to the mom, or they forget, or they didn't have time. You know, it was the worst excuse.
Wow.
And it was really, really frustrating, because we know these moms didn't get it anywhere else, maybe WIC.
Yep.
But as soon as they came in, you're trying to educate what are feeding cues, what's skin to skin, um, how important breastfeeding is, and they don't know any of that. And so you're trying to have these rates be increased, but not getting it where it really needed to be done at. And that was really frustrating. That's why I asked her, because I had a feeling they weren't.
Yeah.
That's where we lax. That's where we don't do the work. That's really, really frustrating.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it's a hard one. I'd say one of the other areas, and I think I kind of mentioned this on like our day one webinar, which did not record. So for those of you that weren't there, you missed out.
It was
But
probably
it was amazing.
It's amazing.
probably one of the
It's
best ones.
We
amazing.
were blubbering, literally
but
tears.
but one of the things that I think I mentioned in there was just you know providers, so this is doctors, nurses, anyone providing support or potentially like coming across a lactating parent, um the what I would consider willful ignorance, at this point. That as what we know is that most doctors, OBGYNs, pediatricians, family practice docs that serve babies, um, begin their practice with about 0 hours of breastfeeding education. The average nurse in those same fields starts their practice with about 3 hours of breastfeeding education. And that is who people are going to for breastfeeding support, right? That's where we're referring to. I mean, that's what's infuriating about like our last conversation about tongue ties, is that as LCs, we can't diagnose a tongue tie. That's something only a doctor can do. And most doctors have 0 hours of breastfeeding
And they're going to say
experience,
there's
right?
no
And
such
they
thing
don't,
as a tongue tie.
yeah, like they don't even know, right? And part of me is like, yeah, like you don't know what you don't know. And I trained under a medical doctor that specializes in breastfeeding medicine. And she would always say, like, we gave up breastfeeding for about 100 years. And so it wasn't a part of our curriculum. It wasn't, like as a society, we just threw it away. Right. And so you have, those are the doctors that are training the new doctors, and so there hasn't been that like maturation, I don't know if that's the right word, like of the education, right? And so I was, part of me is like understanding, and I can find empathy there. And then at the same time, like it's just infuriating to me because
Yep.
I don't understand how you can be working with people where 80%, 90% of your patients want to breastfeed, right? 90% of your patients want to breastfeed, and 100% of your babies should breastfeed, right? That's the recommendation, that 100% of all babies be exclusively breastfed for the first 6 months of their life. And you're the one who's serving those families, and you know nothing about breastfeeding. Like it's just, it doesn't make any sense, and it's it is just willful ignorance at this time. You can get online, you could, attend any number of courses, you could do webinars. Like it's not even that hard to access this information. You could just Google it, right? Like just Google it and you can find out some things.
There's some free too,
There's
free
free stuff.
webinars for
Yeah.
doctors. And we offered it too in our hospital for free webinars.
Like the
and
bar
things,
is set so low for doctors to get this information too, and I was like shocked at one point. I was doing a training up in Alaska for doctors. It was a 3-hour training for doctors. And we, we were doing it. And then the next day I was doing one with the nurses, and one of the nurses let me know that because there was an online component or an online option for this 3 hours of breastfeeding education that the doctors could do. And one of the nurses let me know that she did it for the doctor. Like the doctor asked her to do his training. And I was like, what? This is where I'm like so naive, to like the ways of the world. I like, what? He cheated? Like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe that. And then all the other nurses are like, oh yeah, like that's what we do. Like every nurse knows that you do your doctor's like continuing ed. You do, you do that so they don't have to. It's just like gross, kind of thing. And again, like 90% of your patients want to do this. 100% of your babies should, your own health professions, ACOG, AAP says 100% of babies should be breastfed, and yet nothing about it and choose to remain ignorant, right? And uneducated about it when you have just all this information at your fingertips, and that is causes harm every day. And it's inexcusable. Like I just can't imagine any other healthcare problem where that would be acceptable, except for when it comes to moms and babies, because we're just comfortable throwing them in the garbage.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I'm sorry, I'm gonna just calm down now.
It's okay. I'm thinking about the healthcare, forgive me for not knowing whatever the words are that I'm trying to think of, but so there was a very high incidence or happenings of lung cancer. And then the whole healthcare world was like, it's because of smoking. So we need to go on this big giant campaign of getting people to quit smoking. And then they did. And guess what happened? Lung cancer rates went down.
Significantly.
Significantly. So something about that happened. Something created this, like, we all need to be on board to make this happen. And then everybody jumped on board, and here's what we're going to do. So that's where my mind goes when thinking about, the
Yeah.
problems
Yeah.
that you were just talking about. We need to, you know, if it's possible, we need to find a way to make this problem be as important as
Yeah.
lung cancer,
Do you know
Yeah.
what's yeah,
as
go ahead.
Yeah.
seatbelts,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Yes.
When
Yep.
people were dying,
Yeah.
they're like, you know what? We need to start forcing
Mhm.
people to wear seatbelts, right? So what is the,
And
like, you know what I
yeah.
mean?
And people lived.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
Right?
and people lived, and
Yeah.
yeah. So, and obviously that's not a thing we're going to solve right here in this next hour, but
Yeah.
this is where my mind goes when
Yeah.
I'm seeing
So
those
Yeah.
things.
totally. And there was those big campaigns come from the Surgeon General. So like the Surgeon General put out a call to action for smoking,
Yep.
cessation, and I don't know, probably the 90s or,
Yeah, it was,
sometime
yep,
maybe 80s, early
80s. I think it
90s.
was late 80s.
And it was, that's like the country, America's doctor, right?
Mhm.
Is
Yep.
the Surgeon General.
I even remember
And
what that guy looked like.
right, Guy is the we're going to get to where that's an important piece of this, a guy.
A guy.
Because and the other ones too, like the seatbelt, I think was a
Mhm.
Surgeon General report, back to sleep was a
Yep.
Surgeon
Said,
General,
yep.
kind of thing. And then we actually did have a call to action that was put out by the first female, or not the first female Surgeon General, but a female
A
Surgeon
female
General.
one.
I'm trying to I'm just gonna look it up because I feel bad now that I forgot her name. But uh it came out in probably 2011, 2012,
Mm,
and it was the Surgeon General's call to action, and Surgeon Generals have only put out like 7 in the, in like kind of the history of the Surgeon General. So it's a big deal when they put out a call
Mhm.
to action. And so she put out a call to action for breastfeeding support. Are you looking it up?
Patricia
Yeah.
Horo.
Do you have a picture of her?
Yeah.
She was a Black woman.
Oh no,
No,
not
that's
her.
not her. Yeah. Um, but you can maybe look up the like Surgeon General's call to action for
Okay.
breastfeeding support, and then
Yeah.
it should come out.
Okay.
I think it was like Roberta or something. Anyway, we'll get it. And I apologize for not remembering off the top of my head. But she did put out a call to action for breastfeeding support, and it was an incredible document that really kind of addressed the breastfeeding, the lack of breastfeeding in this country, and tied it to support. That's what it was. It wasn't a call to action to breastfeed,
It was
right?
support.
It was a call to action to support breastfeeding, and it addressed kind of like all facets of society,
Mhm.
from like healthcare providers, lactation supporters. And it was awesome. Like it was such a big deal, and it just like never gained traction,
Mm.
like outside of the lactation world. And it was just one of,
Well, even the
Yeah.
I
Pump
don't,
Act too is like a thing
yeah,
that doesn't even pass.
right.
And it's just like, how does this happen supporting moms to going back to work and breastfeeding? And we also increased the recommendations for breastfeeding up to 2 years now,
Right.
right? How are we supposed to attain that,
Yeah.
and then not have all these policies supported or passed?
Yes.
Yeah. Everything I'm bringing up just brings up the actual, like, report. So it's not.
Yeah. So it was the Surgeon General's call to action to support breastfeeding 2011. So let's try this now. Um Surgeon. Sorry, we're spending all of our time like Googling on this webinar.
But your brain's not going to let it go.
It
So we're going
won't.
to get it figured out.
Um, Joss, Regina Benjamin was the Surgeon General at the time, she's a Black woman.
Yeah.
Um, and so Regina, I was close with Roberta. I'm sorry, Regina, you're amazing. But yeah, I mean, it was a big deal. And yeah,
Yeah.
like Kim said, with the Pump Act, which just failed.
Yeah.
There
There was also another thing that failed with, I know there was a huge grant or something that USPC was really pushing, and that
Yeah.
failed. and along with maternal health
Mhm.
policies. It's just it's crazy to think like how our nation prioritizes health when it comes to mothers and babies.
Right.
And we it's just it's crazy. I
Yeah.
can't believe how it just doesn't it's undermined so much. It's so important too with especially health outcomes for both mom and baby,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So, changing topic just a tad. This is one of the questions I was going to ask in the previous one, ask an IBCLC anything. Um, but it does fall more under this, I think, kind of harm category. So, I've been doing this work, the work that I'm doing. And so for those of you who don't know me, like I'm an Indigenous lactation counselor. But I have no desire to do like lactation work. I don't want to do clinical work. I want to do the work that I'm doing, which is connecting the people that have the resources to the people that need the resources and increasing that access. That's the work that I want to do. Um, and so in the space that I've been doing this work for about 2 years now, um, I have been asked to, do interviews and speak, and, a couple local newspaper articles were printed, has my name and picture and stuff. And um, there was I don't know, a call or a webinar of some sort that I was on, and I had mentioned my story, and part of my story, which, you know, a lot of you guys have heard already, but part of my story was that I said, if I was in my own home community, which is here in northern Michigan, I wouldn't have had access to the support that I had in my geographical location at the time, which was Lansing, Michigan. And there was a nurse, I believe, but an IBCLC for sure, who took the time to find my email and send me an email that said, "We have IBCLCs at Munson."
Oh.
And like that was the extent of her email.
Oh.
And I'm just like, really? And I'm like, then if you are there and you are serving people, then and you're trying to make a case for that, we're here, there's resources available. There's a disconnect between why I would, I don't know anybody up here that has, um, received help from IBCLCs here. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I'm just saying I don't know them. But my point is that how come nobody in my community knows that you're there? And by
Right.
my community, I'm talking about Indigenous
Indians
Mm-hmm.
members
here.
of Grand
Yeah.
Traverse Band.
Yeah.
There's a reason why
Whose
they
land
don't.
you're on.
Yes, there's a reason why they don't know that you exist.
Right.
There's a reason why I don't know that you exist. Don't put that on me. Do not put that on me that I don't know that you are here to help me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And also, you emailing me and saying we're here does not help me,
Right.
especially in the tone that it was presented. And of course, maybe I was like misreading and projecting some tone in the email, but it was very like,
yeah. Well, if you
we're
get one
here,
sentence and that's it, like,
yeah, there was no like,
there was no, hey, I, heard you
nope,
talk. I'm so sorry that you
nope,
didn't get the support you
nope.
needed in your home community. I'm an IBCLC
Yeah.
in Traverse City and would love to connect with
How
you
can we-
about how we can better support
How can
your
we better?
community.
Nope,
Yeah.
none
Yeah.
of that. It
No.
was
So
we're here.
yeah, on our last webinar when Aura was, I think it was yesterday, we had a nurse worked in NICU in Phoenix asking Aura's information, like, I want to connect with Aura. How can we collaborate or help?
Mhm.
That's how you create that relationship, not a, half-ass passive aggressive one-liner,
Yeah.
and that's what's frustrating about people. They get offended, and it's like the system. It's like
Yep.
you can help fix it, be a part of the solution, not create more animosity because your feelings got hurt or whatever. It's so
And
yeah.
and I'm just going to go ahead and say chances are she wouldn't have been able to help you in your situation
For sure.
because she's a hospital-based lactation consultant who is probably completely limited in her scope of practice, unable to diagnose a tongue tie,
Yep.
unable to, talk to parents freely about those situations, probably was a labor and delivery nurse before, and so only has 1,000 hours of the first feed
Yep.
of a like breastfeeding. And so are you able to support someone who's nursing for
Mhm.
3 months with a baby who's tongue tied and coming in as an outpatient, like that kind of I mean, there's like, and this is a problem with us as IBCLCs, right? Like this is an us problem, not a community problem,
Mhm.
where we need to drop our egos and stop saying things like we're the gold standard and we
Yeah.
know all the things and all IBCLCs are the best IBCLCs, because it's just not true.
Right.
There's a huge disparity in how we get credentialed, or huge discrepancies in how we get credentialed.
Yep.
And there is a difference between an out of hospital LC being able to come into someone's home and spend 3 hours with them and see them for their whole family, hear their whole story, their birth, like
Mhm.
the whole thing, which, we've gotten to hear and are still, even after 3 years of knowing you, still getting new little tidbits
Yep.
of that story.
Yes.
Right. And you can't do that in a 50-minute hour.
Yes.
And you just can't, right? And there's just like there's a lot of challenges there, and so it's not a thing. That's again, like that's an IBCLC
Yeah.
thing that we need to stop saying, because there's IBCLCs in a community that there's help there, because it's not.
It's not the same.
No.
And that, yeah.
And many IBCLCs have
Yeah.
failed many of families.
Yes.
And it's peer counselors, right? It's the community lactation supporters that get all of the credit for increasing any breastfeeding rates in this country.
Yeah.
It's not IBCLCs. We're
Yep.
not the ones who
I
are
was a
doing that.
peer counselor.
Kim was. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean,
Yeah.
you just
I
think
mean-
about I mean, I know we keep kind of going back to Aura and Amanda and stuff like that, but just think about the
Yeah.
impact that they have had as non-IBCLCs in that community. All that they've been able to do,
Without
all
IBCLCs.
without any
Yeah.
IBCLCs,
And I help them to a very
Yes.
limited degree. Like I tell them, like Amanda messaged me the other day and she had it down. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, you don't need my
Yeah.
help. You have it. You don't need me. Like it's fine. But the other thing too is when I was in the hospital IBCLC, I did work with clients not the way that the hospital did. So I had to like change my way of thinking in the hospital versus community based. But what I did was I saw these babies coming back 2 months, 3 months back into pediatrics. And I was like, how do I help them? Right. It's a different
It's a
time.
totally different
And so
ballgame.
I took the initiative to go work in a private practice clinic for 2.5 years, for 1 day a week for those years.
Yeah.
And so I worked 6 days a week. And that was because I needed to understand what was going on in the moms, what was happening when they go home, when they leave me, what's happening, how do I fix it, how do I talk to them, all those things, because I wasn't learning that in a hospital.
Yeah.
I didn't learn that. And there's very few LCs that work in a hospital that also do private practice. It's really hard. And I know I
It
had a
is.
hard time.
And it's a hard transition,
It was a
right?
really
Just
hard.
like you had a hard transition from going as a peer counselor to a hospital-based
Mhm.
IBCLC, and then
Hospital
a
too. Yeah.
community-based IBCLC, right? Like
It was
it's
really
just
hard because it's just different. It's way
it is,
different.
yeah. And I have the same problem, like the IBCLC that emailed you.
Mhm.
I could not do her job.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's no way. Like I joke about it, but I'm like, I can't even measure in grams. Like
Yeah.
I don't even know how to do that. Like
And we
I
joke
can't
about
do
it
that
because
math.
yeah.
Like you give me in a NICU, I don't know. I'm just like, I don't know what to do. Like that's just how it is, because not all IBCLCs know everything.
For
And
sure.
this is
Mhm.
again, this is on us. And so, for her, like, yeah, to say like, just go to the doctor or go to the hospital and get that because they're there, is like that
Yeah.
It's
most likely would
different.
have not
Yeah.
served it. And I see this all the time in community, is because we have some hospital-based outpatient clinics and stuff, and they're going to like moms are going there like 6-7 times and stuff, I'm like, I do one visit, maybe a follow-up,
Mhm.
and I'm just like, that's not sustainable to go to a visit, go back to a hospital. Who wants to do that?
Yeah.
You're in your postpartum ceremony. You should be home
Yeah, for
eating,
sure.
drinking tea and eating
All the
blue
yummy,
corn mush
yep,
and
all the
wild
yummy
rice
food.
and bone broth, like that's what you should be doing. You
Yeah.
shouldn't be having to go to the hospital every 2 days
Yes.
to meet with a lactation consultant for an hour, kind of thing. Like that's not super sustainable and not the best way to get things. And then knowing that they're limited because of the system they're in. And that's not the LC's fault, right? That's the system and that's the hierarchy that's in place.
Mhm.
Um, but that's just what I see, and most hospitals do not have outpatient clinics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of them
Yeah.
don't.
I
So
mean,
it's
that's why it's important to have that that bridge between hospital and even culturally
Mhm.
is so important. Like
Yeah.
you didn't know anything, like your community didn't know her from Adam, and
Right.
now she's saying her whatever thoughts and you know, okay, how do you help me? You know what I
Yes.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
what are you gonna do? Like,
Yes. You're still not helping
yeah,
me, lady.
yeah.
But that's a good um I think one of the good things about this like project that I'm doing, because I feel like even though, and I've said this to you guys before, like when the first time I met you guys, when I took the training, like a seed was planted, and now I'm like reciprocating and also planting seeds in the communities. Like here,
Mm-hmm.
you can do something about this. You don't need to rely on
Mhm.
the system
Mm-hmm.
to, bring breastfeeding back in our communities. Like
Mm-hmm.
you decide, and what does that look like for you, and how,
Right.
how can I support you? How can I help you to do this? What works for your community? And when we had our training here at Grand Traverse Band, that second day when the conversations that were happening, like I said, that whole
It was
day,
epic, you guys. Like
I
it
that
was
whole
so
day made
amazing.
my whole like dissertation,
Yeah.
my whole PhD program, like made it worth it
Mm-hmm.
just to hear those conversations. Like, this is what I came here for. This is why I am sacrificing all of the time and my mental
No camping,
capacity.
no
Yes,
summer,
I'm not
No
camping this
no
powwows,
summer.
summer.
no softball games.
Yeah. Totally made it worth it, and that's just one of the ways I see things changing, is to just, we got to take it back ourselves, and do
Absolutely.
it for
Yep.
ourselves, because the system, if the system is going to continue to impede
Yeah.
our healthcare and prioritize our healthcare, then I guess we'll
Yeah. We'll just
Yeah.
we'll do it ourselves.
yep.
Yeah, I mean that's pretty much the way it goes, because
Yeah.
we could sit around and wait a long
Hmm.
time, but
Yeah.
colonizer's gonna colonize. And, like we can't,
Yes.
like it just is not, I don't know. Yeah, I had that happens a lot, when we speak or present,
Mm-hmm.
there's always
Somebody.
like a 1, 2, 3 folks that really take it personally.
Yeah.
They really take it personally. Um, and overall, like I actually, even though like in this setting, I can be a little bit more abrasive and like, straightforward, but bottom line is I'm a therapist. And when I'm one-on-one with anybody, like I'm in general going to be kind of therapist-y, about it. But, and talk through that with someone. But there's always, always folks that take that personally. And I remember when I was first becoming a lactation consultant, and I had this time period between when I had sent in my application to sit my exam and hadn't taken my exam, and then we wait like another 3 to 4 months to get your results.
Mm-hmm.
So it was about like 7 or 8 months um that I wasn't in LC yet. But I had all this knowledge, like there was no difference between like the day I got my results and the day
Mm-hmm.
before, right? And Kim and I had this conversation, when she recently recertified by exam, and that was a similar conversation we
Mm-hmm.
had of like, it's not like you don't you're not any more knowledgeable than you were today
Yeah.
versus yesterday, right? Like that's how it is. But it's just a test and it's dumb. But when for me, like I decided to work as a lactation supporter, right? So I kind of put my name out there as someone that would provide lactation support in my community, which is the 98118 in South Seattle. That I was going to do south of I-90, and that was who I was going to serve. And so we have a pretty active birth professionals page in the Seattle area. And, when someone would post on there, like looking for a lactation consultant, um, you know, I I would get tagged, or
Mm-hmm.
I would say I could see them if they were in my neighborhood, or my part of town. And there would always be this one lactation consultant that would say, you know, this family needs to see a skilled IBCLC. I'm available, and put her name, and it just kind of got to this point where I was like, don't pretend that you come south of I-90,
Mm-hmm.
because you don't.
Yeah.
Like you have no, I know I'm getting into like the geography of Seattle, the Seattle area, but like LCs would have no problem driving 30 minutes east, which is a pretty affluent, part of suburbs of Seattle. They have no problem driving 30 minutes east, but driving 2 miles south into my hood,
Yeah.
that they don't go there. So it just kind of became this thing of like, don't pretend you come here
Yeah.
and that you're going to do that. We all know you don't, and you never will. Right. So just let me serve my people,
Yeah.
and stay out of it. And it was, it just was this thing that kept going back and forth. And I was like, what are you, like, what are you scared
Mm-hmm.
of? Right.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand. Everybody needs support.
Mhm.
Like there's this serious lack of support. And that
Yeah.
is something that a lot of LCs too. There's kind of like a territory threatening,
Mm-hmm.
kind of thing. And that's why I know we're not talking about it, but when we were talking about mentorship on the last session, that's why I believe a lot of LCs won't mentor. There's 23,000 LCs in the US and Canada, and most of them are not mentors. And that's a huge concern. And I think it's because they're afraid of having more LCs.
Yeah.
And that, if they train people, then that's people that will be working in their community, and, and everything like that. That's why, yeah. Anyway, it's
Mark's been shaking his head like,
I'd say, well, I shouldn't say hate. It hurts to see jealous people.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, yeah. And it
there's
just,
plenty of work to be done.
there's
It's
plenty
plenty
of
of work to be done.
work.
Yep.
for
Again.
sure.
Yep.
So what else? What else do you want to rant about?
Does anyone have anything that they want to rant about or comment
Or
about, or
things that you see in
see or
your work?
experience?
I'm trying to think of
Yeah.
some of the things that
Yeah.
I mean,
So I know Jacqueline's on the call or webinar. So Jacqueline, I know you are an aspiring LC that you want to sit for the exam. I know you were looking for mentorship. I'm just curious to know, like, how has that been, looking for somebody to help you, or have you seen any barriers, and what you're trying to do, um,
As a native
as a
person
native person?
in the Phoenix area,
Mm-hmm.
right? Serving
Mm-hmm.
Native people, like, yeah. How does that,
Yeah.
thinking about that?
I think some of the things while we're waiting for her to type in there, I think some of the things that we talked about before, and like Kim kind of brushed on it a little bit when she was talking earlier, is a big thing is language, like just being conscious of the language that you're using when you're talking to people, and yeah, body, like reactions, even the looks on your face. I know this because I am one of those people that I do not have a poker face at all.
You don't?
I do not. when
What?
I when you know immediately how
Yeah.
where my brain goes when I see something or hear something. So I get that it's difficult, right, for some people to just be like, you can't react a certain way when, something is presented to you. So I get that, but I say that, but I also take it upon myself a majority of the time when and especially when I'm doing this work. Like I said, I don't do it very often, but when we were talking about
Mhm.
Blue, when she was messaging
Yeah.
me, I was very careful in the words that I chose when I
Yeah.
was speaking to her, because I did not want to harm her. I did not want to make her feel any type of way. It was very specifically neutral language about, supplements, or about,
Mm-hmm.
just
Right.
things, like
Right.
just being super neutral about it, because I did not want to cause harm. And I didn't want to feel her to feel any type of way, about
However the situation ended
yes,
up. Yeah.
exactly. And so it's hard for me to understand how that's difficult for other people. That's my own fault, like my own, that's just me. I don't see if I can do something, I feel like everybody else can do it. And when they can't, then I'm just like, what is your
What's
problem?
wrong?
What, you know? You got a problem here because you can't do this. And I know, but at least I acknowledge that, and I
Right.
know that, and I
Mm-hmm.
recognize that is my issue, that is my problem. So it's just hard for me to understand how um doctors and nurses and lactation consultants even can just not recognize that language and body language that they're using is harmful to people and
Mm-hmm.
can be harmful. And, like we said, it's not always, it's not like they're out there doing it just to be jerks,
Yeah.
but it happens. So how can we, kind of
Yeah.
roll that back a little bit?
Yeah.
And well, I think that speaks to the importance of diversifying a field and people being able to serve their own community,
Mm-hmm.
because I've been to many places and recognize this myself. Like and we're used to code switching and having to act a certain way in certain groups or environments and do, like that kind of thing. And so I definitely do that. I'm going to be different with a native mom who's a peer, like I know I can act a certain way and it's cool and it works, versus if I were to see a white mom or something like that, which when I did community, was a private practice LC, and especially in my training, I served, a lot of white moms in that space in my internship. And so like I'm just going to act differently, even like when we teach, right? Like
Yeah.
I mean, you've been to lots of our classes. Like it doesn't take long before we start making like dirty
Yeah.
jokes and swearing and like that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. And we would not do that in like a general population
Hmm.
kind of setting. And so like as lactation consultants, you know I just see it. And I've been in this, like in the deep South, and done some work in hospitals that serve predominantly Black moms, and the way that the Black nurses and LCs help those moms, like they say and act and do things that I could never pull off.
Yeah.
Right. Like I could never, ever, ever pull off. I mean, I remember one.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
I remember one nurse that was, walked into a room and was like, there's someone had put a bottle, and nurse had put like a bottle of formula in the room, like on the table for the mom. And the other LC, I think she was an LC, maybe a nurse, but elder Black woman, and this is a young Black mom, just came in and picked up the bottle and threw it in the garbage. And she goes, "Girl, get that titty in the baby's mouth. What are you doing? Like, what are you doing with this?" Like, I could never
Yeah.
ever,
Mm-hmm.
ever, ever walk into the room and do that, right? Like a young white nurse could never walk into the room of a Black mom and say something like that.
Hmm.
But that one could,
Yep.
right? Because she was from the community and of the
Hmm.
community. And there's a way that you talk and, and everything like that. And that's, I think, some of the challenges for healthcare providers that are serving Native parent, people who just, let's say it statistically, are going to be non-Native, because there's not a lot of us
Yep.
that are like doctors and lactation consultants,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that, that they don't feel comfortable working with people outside of their community,
Hmm.
and they don't know it, they don't say it, but we read it,
Yep.
and we can feel that. And so if you're uncomfortable and you come into a space and are awkward, or like timid, or like not saying things a certain way, that kind of stuff like that. We know that as patients and can feel that. And so I think, yeah, again, it just kind of speaks to like the importance of diversifying the field, getting more people working in the community to serve their own, because yeah, it's just an important piece of it.
Yeah. And I can see where when you say awkward, it's awkward for the patient. Like
It
it's
is.
so like, how am I supposed to respond to that? Or how am I supposed to act? It just is a weird dynamic. And then you miss, good patient care,
Yeah.
and it's just, I've seen it. And I've been in those situations where I'm like, oh, I'm going to find someone else.
Yeah.
Help
And
this
it's like
family.
it's
Yeah.
one of two ways. It's either kind of like really awkward or like overly friendly.
Oh yeah.
Right. And it's like in this
Yeah.
attempt to not be awkward, is
Yeah.
I'm just gonna be like really nice and stuff. And then that like freaks out the
Yeah.
patient too, right? They're just like, what's going
Yeah.
on?
What's wrong with her?
Yeah. White people are weird. Like that kind of thing. So it's like that comes with time and comfort and
Mhm.
skill. I know that as as a new social worker, is what I can speak to. When I was a new social worker, I even look back on some of my posts as they kind of pop up on Facebook, my memories. Oh my God, the things I used to write
Oh yeah.
about,
I sound
like,
so dumb.
complaint. Oh, I
So
just
dumb.
am so ignorant.
I know I'm always like delete.
So
I
rude,
know that was 14 years ago, but we're still gonna delete it.
yeah,
Yes, I
like
get it. Yeah.
and so it's not, I don't want to make it sound that this is just something that like non-native providers go
Correct.
through, like we go through it. I was, yeah, just really naive.
Mhm.
I cringe at some of the things I
Same.
said
too.
and did, and that kind of stuff. And then I got better.
Yep.
Because I was willing to
Yep.
accept the areas that I needed to grow in
Yep.
and learn
For
and
sure.
get better. And that humility is not necessarily something that I see in the overall healthcare field.
Mhm.
And it's important though.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
I said it on one of the earlier recordings, um, that the humility of the chief of the NICU where my
Yeah,
son was
yeah.
born was the lesson that I needed to see. I did not know that, that existed. I did not know that, this woman who's the head of the NICU and in charge of all these doctors and saving all these babies would literally be like, well, I'm not the infant feeding expert, you are.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
let the nurse and the nutritionist decide
Yeah.
the game plan
Yeah.
for his nutrition. And not, she was like, nope, I'm
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
You guys know what you're doing. I don't. And for me, like, wow.
And there's a
Yeah.
cultural competency little tidbit for working with Native families too, right? Is that in general, we are not impressed by your knowledge,
Correct.
right? Like that is just something that like is not like culturally, like that's not impressive. So
Mhm.
you just like sharing all the things right, is not going to be helpful. It's showing humility that builds trust, right?
Yes.
Like that is impressive to Native people,
Mhm.
and so that's something that I think that is really good for, in general. There's not a things that we can make like blanket statements about Native people, but I do
Yep.
find that pretty universally that is true,
Oh, for
that
sure.
it's about building relationships, building rapport, showing humility, not that you're an expert, not that you know all the things,
Mhm.
Yep.
not that, like you're smarter than everybody. You act like that, we immediately know you're lying, right?
Yeah.
Like, and are questioning everything. And so I think that's something that is important for like providers, if, there's any here or watch later, to know about when working with Native families, that is going to go so much further than you just like hobbling along and not showing that you don't know.
Yep.
Right? Like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
I mean,
Yeah.
that applies to us, like to us within our own communities too, right?
Yeah.
Like every time I come home, I gotta go be super res real quick so people know, like,
Right,
like
right.
I'm still cousin. I'm
Yeah,
still,
yeah.
I'm still cousin. I'm not just,
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah.
yes.
Totally. I think one of my mentors, Kimmery Bug, Dr. Kimmery Bug, I call her Mama Bug. She says, and it might be like Tupac, or it might be something she made up. I
Yeah.
don't actually know. Like, I don't know if like where it comes from. But she says, I don't care what you know until I know that you care.
Mm,
And that's something to,
Yep.
and she's a Black woman that serves a predominantly Black community. And that's something I've heard her say a lot to providers, and
I like that.
that I resonate with that too.
Yeah.
That it's true. Like we don't care what you have to say until we know that you care
Yeah.
about us and
Yeah.
love us and want what's best
Yeah.
for
And
us.
with that care, I think also what I find important is um, families when they explain to them what's happening with their
Mm.
baby, or what's happening
That's a
with
good one.
the
Yeah.
baby, or I mean with their body and their baby. They want to know why does my baby have jaundice? Why
What
do
is jaundice?
yes.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
Yes.
why do I have to stay longer? They really want you to break it down and what's going on with their baby, because it's scary. I mean, I see moms cry and they don't like,
Yep.
my baby, something's wrong. And I had to go and explain what's happening. Is it's going to be fine? This is common. Baby just needs to break down some extra things. Their liver's still working hard. It's okay. And just to like sit down and spend that time with them,
Yep.
human to human, with empathy and understanding. They really, really appreciate that.
They appreciate it, and that speaks to the relationship
Yep,
building.
that
You're
trust.
building a relationship with that person when you're
Yep,
just a simple thing is explaining why we're doing this.
yep,
Why is this
yeah,
happening?
exactly. And why do we have to pump? What's happening with your milk right now? Why is it important for the baby? I mean, I spent 2 hours educating, with
100%.
families,
Yep.
like just so they don't, you know, fall apart and get scared. I mean, that's scary. Like I can't even imagine going through that as a new mother, or if they're alone. I think that speaks huge of that caring. I want them to know they care about me.
Yep.
And I think that providers need to show that empathy and that caring component of, they really do care. And this is why they do what they do, right?
Totally. And that acknowledgement that we're smart enough
Yeah.
to know what you're saying.
Yes,
Right.
yes,
Because I think
absolutely.
that really goes into that bias that providers have, particularly around like Black and Indigenous moms and, and
Yeah.
stuff, that we're not smart enough to know these complex medical,
Yeah. No.
things that are happening to our babies. And so you're gonna, dumb it down to the bare minimum so that we get it. And that's just not the truth. Like we
Yeah.
are smart. We are capable of understanding those things. That was something that came out a lot when we were being, talking about the vaccine for
Mhm.
COVID. I kept saying, like, we need to explain why this vaccine was created in less than a year,
Mhm.
right? Like our community is capable of understanding that, right? Explain that it's been worked on for 20 years
Yeah.
because this is the whatever 400th strain of
Yep.
coronavirus
Yep.
that's occurred, and it's actually, it wasn't something that just was made in the last year, type thing. Like explain that to community, and because we are capable of hearing that information and understanding it, and explain how it works. And that's what's going to make us have more trust in it, not writing things at a fifth grade
Yeah.
reading level,
Yep.
Yeah.
which is what, they like public health tends to do, of
Yeah.
like, oh, we're just going to make this easier for them to understand. No, tell us the truth,
Yeah.
Yep.
because we're capable of understanding it.
Yeah.
And we want to know.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to build trust.
Yeah.
Right? Like not the other way
Yeah.
around.
And it just, things go much better with the care, the
Yes.
trust,
Yes.
all those things. So it's just really important that providers take the time to really break it down for them and have them understand what's happening, because they appreciate that so much.
And it creates buy-in, right?
Yeah.
Then the family is like, oh,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense now, versus if they don't know, they're going to question you, and they're going to text their cousin, they're going to text the so-and-so, they're going to get on the mom group, and they're going to be like, they're telling me that I have to supplement my baby
Mhm.
because they have jaundice. And then there's going to be like 40 moms that
Telling her something
respond
different.
saying like, no, you don't need to supplement, da da da. And maybe it is medically necessary that
Yep.
that baby be supplemented,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
Like that kind of thing. And so there is an immense amount of harm done
Yeah.
by healthcare professionals by just not taking the time and the energy to explain things to families and answer questions and just be
Yeah.
honest.
Yep. Totally.
So
So
yeah.
good information, good point. So do we have good timing?
We have
Yeah,
about
Okay.
we got about
10, 15 more minutes. Are
Okay,
there any
so
minute questions?
yeah, Jacqueline just responded to our
Okay.
question about her. Yes, it is about building relationships to get mentorship opportunities. I've done in my work, I've done tons of building relationships, and I still have a lot of relationships in Arizona from when I began in WIC to even now. So I'm really happy that you are networking and building those relationships. And and one advice I can say is don't burn bridges. They will know. People will know in the community. And then the other is you mentioned that yes, sometimes mentorship programs or mentors will want you to commit to some form of payback to like working with them for 2 years for a bare minimum or for free or something like that. And you were saying that this is what you've been finding, and yes, you don't want to be committed to do that, and then it's hard to find uh people that don't want anything in return. And my thing, what all I wanted in return for the mentorship in the hospital was give back to the community, give back to those families, and mentor someone else that had the same challenges that you did. And that was the only thing I asked from the mentees that came in the hospital. I didn't ask for money or anything like that. My mentor, she was a white Irish woman that worked IHS. She was a wonderful mentor of mine, and she always believed that Native people need to be served by Native people, and especially with breastfeeding. And so she was the one that really pushed me to understand that representation matters. And she'd always say, like, your people, Kim, never wants to see an old Irish woman help them breastfeed. And so I find that, it is true. And she had the best intentions for me, and she didn't ask for anything, just to do the work. And so hopefully you find that. And those clinical hours they can be long, they can take a long time. I'm seeing it on Facebook. We're 4 to 5 years now.
Yeah.
Whereas Cam and I did it in 2 years.
Yeah, we did it. We were quick. We had the faster track.
Yeah. So
Kim, as a peer counselor, collected her hours that way. I also had two white mentors that took me in to train me. And that was, for them, it was part of like a racial equity. They wanted to train a BIPOC LC and give that information. And so they approached me about being my mentors. I would have never in a million years approached them, about that. Like, they're some of the best, the best of the best. So I'm always grateful for that. But 2 years is what it took me.
You had excellent training.
I had excellent training.
Yeah, really good.
I had really excellent training. And that's where, I really saw a difference as I started kind of seeing how other folks, like became LCs and things. I was like, oh, not everyone has like had this experience, type thing.
Yeah.
So it's, it does. It takes a long time. And it's important, it's an important part of it. I just happen to get in my life in general, just things happen the way they're supposed to. But I was approached during my internship during the recession, and it had been of 2008, or no, sorry, 2011, and had been approached during that time. And so I had worked for public health at that point, and they laid off 50% of employees in public health because of the recession. And I was part of that, and just happened to get 18 months off unemployment, because the federal government kicked in an additional year of unemployment. And so I was able to work for free, and do my internship that way. And I had a baby, and I was able to bring her, and, things like that. So it just worked out. I don't think if I had been approached any other time, there's no way I could have pulled it off.
It looks like someone raised their hand.
Yeah.
Oh, was that me again? I hope not.
No, it's Deborah.
Allowed to talk.
Is that Auntie Deb?
Sure.
It is Auntie Deb. Deb, did you have a question? If she's just pushing buttons. She may not.
Hey, Deb.
Sorry, it was an accident.
Oh, you there?
Yeah. Can you hear me? Hello?
There
There
you
you
are.
go.
Sorry, it was an accident.
Oh,
Oh, all right. Well, happy to hear your voice.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it really was an accident.
oh.
Okay.
That's okay. Good
I
to
was
hear.
walking down the hallway. All right.
Safe.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm wondering if other folks have seen anything or have any comments around things that how they've seen harm perpetrated by healthcare providers, particularly when it comes to breastfeeding. I will say one of the things I've been seeing lately, which is it's a little harder for me to verbalize, so I'll probably mess up with it, but there's been a lot of a lot of discussion around the maternal mortality rates, particularly in the Native community and the Black community. And so I'm seeing a lot of Native pregnant people kind of like just treated like they're high risk, and kind of a lot of interventions are happening in their births, and kind of like, because maternal or infant mortality rates are high, it's kind of like, oh, let's induce them at 39 weeks, because going beyond that increases maternal mortality rate, right? Like
Yeah.
they're just kind of this thing of like kind of doing more interventions to prevent maternal mortality, when in actuality it actually causes more challenges for breastfeeding.
Oh, yeah.
And and so the way a baby is born, the birth absolutely impacts breastfeeding.
Yeah.
And so I've been seeing that a little bit more lately, of kind of like, no, actually, instead of like being more intervention heavy, we actually want you to do less, like that
Yeah.
seems to be like, we actually want you to be more hands off.
Mm.
But I think that that's just kind of like the way
Yeah.
the system is at this point.
And they need education too, even just birth education, right? And
Yeah.
how a mom would give birth naturally can,
Yeah.
and that these things may not be necessary.
Right.
I think too is a lot of the education is based also not just liability, but fear.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Fear of something happening. So they just kind of,
Just
have,
do all the things and are hyper vigilant.
Yep.
And it's like, no, let's
Yeah.
actually step back.
Yep.
And
I think it takes a really skilled doctor to really kind of let go of the reins a little bit and kind of observe and watch.
Yeah.
And that takes time, experience, and intuition.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Yep.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, breastfeeding is the same thing, I think, too.
Totally.
Yeah.
Here's a good one that Aura said. I think a big one, I see providers are pushing to pump when a mom needs help, time with education, with latch positioning and reassurance. A pump doesn't solve everything. Yes. I also see that.
Even like nipple shields.
Yeah, I definitely see that. And I actually see it not just providers. I see a lot of parents actually thinking I'll do my little pump rant real quick. Is that I actually feel like pump companies have played a huge role in this. Pump companies benefit from people pumping breast milk, not from people breastfeeding.
Yep.
And so they have are breastfeeding directly from the breast or the chest. And so there is kind of assumption that I see in the general population of people that are pregnant and having babies, is that they need to pump to be successful at breastfeeding, right? And Kim, you've said, like, people come to the hospital with a pump,
Oh, yeah.
like thinking that they
They're
need,
gonna pump.
they need to pump to bring milk in, or they need to do the, kind of thing. And that is just not the case. And we've really kind of like, we've done a decent job in the United States of making sure people know that breast milk or human milk is important, right? But we've actually kind of like removed the breastfeeding from that scenario. And that's actually pretty important too.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
I think it's a pretty important part of
Yeah.
it, especially for establishing supply, you know, things like that. And so, you know, I think that I agree, Aura, that providers are pretty keen to encourage pumping, or just say like if breastfeeding's not working out, just pump, you
Yeah.
know, and it's
Yeah.
like pumping sucks,
Yeah.
literally and
And it doesn't,
figuratively,
you're right.
you
It
know,
doesn't,
like
yeah, it doesn't solve
it
everything.
doesn't solve the
Yeah.
breastfeeding problem, you know, and so yeah, it is something that if we just take the time to help with latch, provide that education, positioning, all of that kind of stuff, then they're going to be it's going to be better. But a pump is not an essential part of breastfeeding unless you are separating from your baby
Yep.
at some point, which
Yep.
most are. So most people, you know, in this day and age, like most of us are going to pump after we have our babies, but we do not need to do it for weeks and weeks and weeks, assuming that separation isn't happening until
Yeah.
later.
Yeah. So we have a lot of comments and questions.
Yes,
Oh,
thank you,
yeah.
everyone. Everyone woke up. Hello.
Yeah. You guys should have said these earlier.
Yes.
All right. So it looks like let's see here. Krista just said provides did not send a lactation consultant at all with multiple requests at C1.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why they did that, Christy. That is a huge problem. I don't know. I can't give you
I feel like
a
I
quick
feel like
answer on that. Like it's just that's unacceptable if you
Well,
have
they might not have one, right? I mean, like thinking about, because Christy's a birth worker, so I'm gonna just, you know, this may be Christy as like a birthing parent, or maybe as a doula serving families in
Mhm.
hospital, right? So one is the hospital may have not had one. Kim was the only the only LC in her hospital for 10 years.
Mhm.
So if you delivered
At
you know,
8
after
o'clock
5
at night, yeah.
p.m.
Or
bet-
6, you are not
yeah,
gonna see me
between
till the next
6,
morning.
yep, and
Yep.
the next day or on the weekends, right? You weren't gonna, there was no LC to call.
Yeah.
And that's a problem. That's a problem with the system, you know, and that they are choosing not to spend money on lactation consultants when 90% of their population wants to breastfeed and 100% of those babies should be breastfed, and they still choose not to spend their money on those things. And LCs are not, you know, hate to break it to you, you know, it's not the most lucrative career. And you know, if you're working as an LC, like you're not,
Yeah.
pay wise, it's not an expensive position,
Sure.
you know, to have. So it could be that, it could be that there was just one, and
Or there was few, but got called to do
other things.
RN roles. That's what
That
they
happened
do.
a lot in COVID.
Yep.
Because a lot of hospital LCs are RNs. And so with COVID, they were pulled, that
They
was
were
seen as
pulled.
a non, what's the word? A non
Um,
essential
yeah.
position. A
Well,
non-
I stayed because
yeah,
but RNs all got pulled that were lactation into serving and assisting patients care. It was
COVID
patient care.
patients.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep. There was no way around that.
So that could have been it. But yeah, super duper frustrating.
Yeah,
And I
for sure.
also have had parents that, you know, end up calling and saying like, no one's seen me at the
Yeah.
hospital,
Mhm.
you know, when they should have been seen before discharge,
Yep.
that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
it's really frustrating.
Yeah.
That's one. But yeah, that's a good one.
Well, Jacqueline, we do agree that they need lots of birth education for sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
My
Vanessa.
Yeah. So yes, hi Vanessa. I've personally seen this. One of my clients have been tested multiple times for diabetes in her, and the
Doctor's making her take
Take unnecessary meds to prevent
complicate. Oh, that's kind of like that high risk,
yeah.
you know, thing of just kind of going overboard on the interventions for fear of something bad happening.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah. Danielle, I had a doctor tell me my baby wasn't gaining enough weight when I was struggling with breastfeeding. So I was told by this doctor to start supplementing with formula. And that was my biggest mistake. So yeah, that's a really common
Mhm.
situation. And that is an area that providers do cause harm in. It is important that babies gain weight. And our next presentation, our next session, we're going to be talking a little bit about supply and
Mhm.
low supply and things like that and expectations. So if a baby isn't gaining enough weight, like that is a concern, but the solution to the breastfeeding problem is not to supplement or to quit breastfeeding. It's to address the breastfeeding problem. And we know that supplementing decreases milk supply. So without any additional guidance to protect
Mhm.
supply or increase supply. And so that's a really common experience,
Yep.
Danielle. I've seen it so many times and
Mhm.
it's really, really frustrating.
Yep.
And it's lazy, not on your part. It's a lazy provider.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
it's an easy way out, and they mostly just care about a baby getting their weight
Yep.
up and not that baby doesn't develop
Yeah.
diabetes.
And also there's a discrepancy between doctors and pediatricians who um on this weight gain thing. Like
Mhm.
there are some who know. So an example that I'll use, our pediatrician, remember I mentioned Frankie was on in the 1 percentile for
Mhm.
weight, and her thing was as long as he stays on his growth curve,
Yeah,
he doesn't need to
because the
be.
baby's got to be in the one.
Yes,
There's got to be a
Yeah.
he's
baby
got to
in
be.
the
Yep.
1%.
She's like, I'm not concerned about it. Whereas another doctor might look at that and be like, he's in the 1st percentile.
You
He's
need to
not. You need
supplement.
to supplement. He's not getting enough food and sending me into panic.
Mhm.
If she had said that to me, I may have done just that and panicked,
Totally.
like he's not getting enough milk. But she was like, nope, we're just going to make sure that he stays on this growth curve. I'm not saying that that's what happened in your case, Danielle. We don't know that. I'm just saying, pointing out the fact that I see this a lot with doctors, in particular in pediatricians, is this what as a non-healthcare worker, non-lactation consultant person is bad advice. Like
Yeah.
here's you're not a you're they're not infant feeding experts.
Yeah.
So, the putting the go put cereal in the milk and in the bottles,
Yeah.
or give them food because
Mhm.
you're starving the baby and they need food at
Yeah.
3 months old, like
Yeah.
solid food. I mean,
Yeah.
no,
Yeah.
they don't.
No.
Yeah.
These are just some of the things with the doctors where and again, it goes back to the ego thing. Like, I'm the doctor
Mhm.
here. I'm going to tell you what to do, and here's what you need to
Yeah.
do. And
And it
it's like,
causes harm,
it does
right?
cause harm
Lots
Yeah.
of harm.
when
Yeah.
and again, simple thing, take an hour of some training and
It's
learn.
not that hard to learn.
Yeah.
It's not, the information's out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another one I was kind of thinking about, similar to this, kind of where what I see pediatricians and another area where people kind of reach out to me, is around kind of the 4-month mark, and they go to the doctor for that 4-month well child check,
Mhm.
and the provider tells them that baby has doubled their birth weight, or they're 4 months old, and so they no longer need to eat at night. Like
Oh my
without
gosh.
Yeah.
without the parent's not complaining about sleeping, right? The parent didn't address, like, ask any challenge, mention anything, but it's just like a thing that they say,
Yeah.
which is not based in evidence. There is absolutely like nothing, no truth to that at all. We know that it's completely normal for babies to nurse throughout the night, well into their second year
And
of
they have
life,
to.
and
They
they
have
have
to.
to for milk supply. And we'll talk about that
Mhm.
probably on the next session. So maybe I shouldn't get too far into it.
Yeah.
But that's another area that I've seen pediatricians specifically
Mhm.
cause harm and
Yeah.
undermine breastfeeding.
And they
That's
don't
going
know.
really well.
Yeah.
And it's actually not even a problem for the
Yeah.
family,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
just like share it. And it's like sleeping through the night. Sleeping is not a developmental milestone, first of all. It's not anywhere on the things that babies need to do at a certain age, or
Yeah.
that we
And
need
that
to
was told
teach
to
them.
me with my
Absolutely.
kids. That was a
Yeah.
long time ago. So, and unfortunately, they probably say the same things to families, right?
Yeah.
That baby should be sleeping through the night. Put
Yeah.
them in a
Yeah.
crib, let them
They
cry.
don't need it.
Yeah.
They don't need to eat at
Yeah.
night, and
Yeah.
it's like, oh, so then parents start getting worried that they aren't doing the right thing by their baby, and it's like, that's just not
Yeah.
the truth.
Yeah.
Feed the baby, sleep with the
Feed
baby.
the
It's all,
baby.
feed the babies, all the babies.
All right, one
So-
last comment there.
Yeah, Vanessa just had a follow up from the previous one. The type of
Yeah.
care her client
And
is
stressing
her
mom
out. She's only at 20 weeks and they will do a C-section, and it's making her extremely anxious. So it is really hard. I will say, I don't know if you're a doula or something like that, or where you live, Vanessa, but this would be a conversation that I would have as a doula. If I had a client that was stressing out about this, I would maybe discuss with the client about switching providers and finding a provider that is more just more
Yeah.
open or friendly, or not friendly as in like nicer, but kind of friendly to the diabetes, like there's there's more like fat positive doctors,
Yep.
there's, and I'm not saying anything about that, there's VBAC friendly doctors, right? There's just providers that are more open and friendly to working with people with certain conditions or risk factors for certain
and a
conditions,
better patient
and
care,
totally.
understanding,
And so
empathy,
20
yeah.
weeks is still early enough to do that. And a lot of parents, the idea of switching providers is really scary for people. And we counsel people in my doula program all the time about that. If they're having problems with their provider, or disagreeing with them, or whatever, or they learn, I'll do intakes with people and be like, where are you birthing? And they'll say, like, at the hospital. I really was interested in a home birth, but I'm high risk. Oh, you're high risk? Like, what? You didn't tell me that. Like, what are you high risk for? Well, I'm overweight.
Yeah.
That does not risk you out of a home birth. You want to talk to some midwives that, will work with you or something like that. And so at 20 weeks, that can be something that you can, open that discussion with your client and empower them to maybe explore an option that will be less stressful for them. Particularly midwifery care, potentially an out of hospital, midwifery care. I don't know, the details of the complications, but gestational diabetes does in general not risk someone out of hospital birth. So that's just something that I would probably do as a doula, if I was working with
Just
someone
finding
and they
explore
were
options.
stressed. If they were stressed, yeah.
Yeah.
Because we still have another 20 weeks to go, hopefully, right? Baby stays in that long, and so that's still a long time. I also want to recognize that you might live in a community that there are no other doctors, there are no
Yeah.
other places to deliver, there's no other options, and want to acknowledge like my privilege of serving an urban community that has a lot of options. Is we have a lot of midwives, we have a lot of hospitals to choose from, and so I know that not every community has that. So want to acknowledge that too, that she may not have another option. But if she does, I would definitely kind of explore that with her of like, hey, and maybe they can, post in a Facebook group, a parent group or something of like, hey, I'm looking for a provider that is, you people have had experiences of working with people that are maybe pre-diabetic or whatever that is, and you can get some suggestions. So yeah. Anyway,
Awesome.
yeah.
All right.
Well,
But doctors, you'll lose patience over stuff like this. Which
yes.
hurts your bottom line. So it's in your
If
best
that's-
interest.
Yes, if that's
It is in everyone's best interest to do better.
yes.
So
All right. Well, I think we're on time now, so we're gonna cut this one at where we're at.
Yeah.
Thank you everybody for joining us and for all the words that you shared with us and problems that helped us with our conversation. So we appreciate that. Everybody check out nooniproject.com and share this with any of the people that you think need to be here. We've got one more session that's coming up in about 20 minutes. Making milk supply. How's milk made? I don't know.
it's magic. It's magic.
It's
amazing.
magic. Magical milk.
All right.
We'll see you there. Thanks
All
for
right.
joining us.
Bye.
Go
Bye,
ahead.
Maki.